But let's not pretend for a moment that these radical leftists, these terrorists, are operating from a place of sincere political conviction. Sure, there are plenty of useful idiots that they use who may believe these discredited ideologies. The leftist is fundamentally motivated by envy, by hatred, by jealousy. The leftist looks at what is beautiful and what is good and what is natural and is filled with envy and hatred. The leftist looks at a perfect family with the perfect life and a perfect job and perfect kids that goes to church every Sunday and is filled with a feeling of inadequacy and jealousy, and they covet, and they turn those emotions ultimately into a desire to subjugate, to oppress, and to inflict pain and suffering.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome to the number one conservative talk show in America. My name is Braden Belden.
I'm Linda Franzak.
Mm-hmm.
We are, of course, joined by
producer Young Chomsky.
Oh, there we go. And this is TrueAnon. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Zeke Heil. How you doing? Welcome to the show. I want to make some things clear before we start the episode today.
We are Nazis.
Yes, we are Nazis. We're Nazis, and that's not. It's not like a race thing.
It's not a race thing.
It's not just a race thing. It's not a race thing. It's not like a politics thing. It's just our political beliefs.
It's just a personal thing.
And we keep that out of the rest of the show. Those are our own beliefs. It's like being a Mennonite or something like that. You know, it's something that we do on the side. Obviously, it affects the clothes we wear and things like that. But it's not something that really is looming over our lives. Today, unfortunately, that changes because we have to make it very clear before we start the episode that we have been playing roles, like characters on this show, similar to like Frasier. You know,
like when
guy?
He's doing his show, or like the show Frasier.
I've never seen a second of the TV show Frasier.
Okay,
but he's played by a certain man,
an actor. Yes, Kelsey Grammer.
And so, like when Kelsey Grammer, exactly, crazy.
Wait, but he's a radio host in the show.
Proves my point even more, right? So like when Kelsey plays Frasier, he's like playing a character. When Frasier plays Frasier on his radio show, that's just another version of Frasier, which is another version of Kelsey.
You know what? That is very true.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it goes even deeper because Frasier was a spinoff from Cheers.
I'd say I didn't even know that. I've also never really seen Cheers either. The reality is on this show, we have been playing characters that profess to believe certain things or whatever, or talk about certain subjects for certain reasons. That was what comedians often call a joke. Today is our true selves, which we're revealing that we are, in fact, personally right-wing, although, again, we don't let that affect the comedy sketch show that we've been doing here for 7 years.
I don't think anyone has a problem with any of this.
I'm just saying. I know. I think that many of our listeners probably agree, probably have the exact same opinions as us. We're all just here doing a bit, right? That's what they go. We're doing a bit.
We've been doing a long bit.
And we are dropping it today to talk about some guys that we agree with and support.
That would be Little Marco and Stephen Miller. Two of the biggest guys that the administration has.
Well, there's some problems I had with something that Stephen Miller said. Stephen Miller's Jewish, right?
I don't see that.
He keeps making reference to people going to church. We don't call it that.
Well, maybe he's talking about the people who go to church.
I know, but he's like, normal families go to church. What are you saying?
Well, I don't know what he's saying about I disagree with him because I do think Jewish families are normal.
Not my family.
I do too. But I would be really curious to see what is going on with like circumcision in his family. Because if they're keeping that part but not going to temple, I do find that odd. There was a ministerial on the resurgence of political violence on July 16th. State Department ministerial. What the fuck? I don't know if I've ever
I
heard
don't
of
like
the U.S.
this.
hosting a ministerial.
I want to
before.
say something real quick that I was thinking about this, and I was like, who came up with this name? This is not, there's no naming convention that this applies to. And I feel like the only way to make sense of it is Stephen Miller in his like return to tradition, like stupid, like meme brain. Again, and I say this with all due respect because we love the man. Thought that it sounded like old, like it sounded like, you know, the power of the Magna Carta to talk about the ministerial. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like it's so stupid. This is not a thing that we have. We don't have ministerials.
No, I'm
we
sorry.
don't have ministers.
No, we're a
What are we,
first world
European?
country.
We're not European.
We don't have we have secretaries here, like an office, right? And we have male secretaries because we are a progressive country. We threw off the yoke of Great Britain back in 1776, and we decided to give men women's jobs, mostly not to women. Those jobs were given in the executive branch of the federal government. So Secretary Rubio, I don't really know. Stephen Miller, sort of a secretary without portfolio. He's kind of floating around out in there. And they just get to have their little conferences. Stephen Miller gives a little too many speeches, I will say, for his role in the administration.
He's writing a lot of the speeches too.
You know, and it's a damn shame that his xenophobia prevents him from much international travel, because that man, if he could just spend 2 days in Istanbul getting that hair fixed, getting a little something on that dome up there, a little ketchup on that hot dog, we're not giving him mustard.
Could you imagine though if he did come back from like the NATO conference?
Yeah, and he's got a fucking rockabilly like a Buffon,
and then just like gaslit the nation.
He's like, yeah,
and was like, "What are you talking about?
This is. I finally
This
took
is
off
from
the
all
bald cap.
the beef tallow. What are you talking about?
You can regrow it. It's just
there's a bunch of subreddits that I you know am a member of, and through some research in there and some peptides, we've been regrowing my hair. That's, you know, he could do it.
It's been long said that on this program that if you are bald, it's because God intended it. And if you're taking any of those medications, the finasteride, or if you're going and getting your radical surgeries in foreign countries to fix your problem, you are going against God, and you might be in heaven on earth living here with great hair. But when you die, you will go to hell with all other bald people, but you're going to a worse part with those who betrayed their bald brothers.
I don't think it's that serious, but I do like this idea that like all the plastic surgery and enhancements you get on earth go away once you go to heaven.
Yeah, you're taking
So it's like,
advantage.
imagine you get to heaven and you're like, I fucking made it.
Yes.
But then it's like, sorry, no tummy tuck for you. No boobs. No nothing. No
Schaefer
filler. No
width and-
facelift.
No Schaefer width and girth procedure.
Swag.
You've got, oh no, your tibias are not broken anymore.
Exactly.
Are still short.
Exactly.
You've got, you know, you're fully bald when you get up to those pearly gates. They're looking at your pearly head right at those pearly gates. Can you imagine?
If you get to heaven,
would it be heaven if you showed up and you were suddenly bald?
Exactly. Would it be heaven if you showed up and you were bald and 5'3"? You look like the singer of Rose Tattoo, and you
But
get up there.
perhaps it would be God teaching you a lesson.
Yeah, and he does.
And then
that.
in that case, it wouldn't be heaven. It would be some sort of purgatory, maybe. We got to work this one out. Anyway.
The ministerial was nasty. It had Rubio. Rubio's speeches are all kind of samey. So like, there was a nasty speech. And it was kind of like, it was a little, I guess, different because he's usually just talking about Venezuela and Cuba. And this time he was actually talking about Americans for once. But he's saying that the U.S., for some reason, we excise the history of violence on the left or from the left rather, out. We don't talk about the history of violence.
Yeah, he kind of started talking about how the US had like a total blind spot to the left. That historically this is like not something, we'd let this thing go on for far too long, which of course makes no sense. He lumped together a bunch of things. He started talking about communists, anarchists, Marxists, and anti-capitalists, that there was this huge kind of movement all working together that was completely hostile to what they called Western civilization, which is always that's always great when you hear
I'm
that.
like, well, what tradition does Marx hail from then?
Stephen Miller, so it was like two speeches. And they kind of complemented each other. You kind of had like the the outside and the inside, which we'll talk about. But Stephen Miller went full like Blutenboden, talking about how he described the left as a cancer, and that it was it was the job of the world to root it out.
Yes,
which is something he mentioned. I think we're going to go into some more specifics with his speech because it's worth kind of like diving in there. We're going to do that a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, we played some of it up top too. I think what was notable, and again, we'll get to this later, is that he really went on a diatribe against fellow travelers. And you could talk about, or you could rather listen to Marco Rubio's speech and detect that same thing, because there has always been this, speaking of envy on the right of sort of a friendliness to, or at least like a, I don't know what you want to call it, the figure of the fellow traveler, or at least like the person the liberal who is sort of taken advantage of by the left winger. And this was really more of a thing in like the 1920s through maybe like 1950s. It sort of ended with.
And what else was going on during that period?
Yeah, exactly. But like with this sort of elite flirtation with communism that sort of ended with McCarthyism and the secret speech. And it really hasn't been a thing for a long time, although in the right-wing mind, it sort of still exists in the figures of like Kathy Boudin, basically just Kathy Boudin, and some of the Weather Underground people.
It's also vintage to me.
I know. They really don't have.
We'll get into this when we talk about the Cuba stuff, but it was sort of like you're reading this and they're the right version. And I know they're selling this story, right? So yes, putting that aside. But it's sort of shocking, the package that they're putting together. And you're like, this is so not a thing that you're describing that it's truly shocking to me.
Well, it is interesting in all of the talk about like left-wing violence that has come out of particularly Miller and Rubio in recent weeks and months has given sort of these vague lists of incidents and people who enacted left-wing violence in recent history. And very few of these people are left-wing. I mean, he talks about the two Trump shooters, neither of which is identifiably left-wing. He talks about the guy who shot Charlie Kirk, or allegedly shot Charlie Kirk, hasn't been proved in court yet. Doesn't seem to be particularly left-wing, certainly not somebody who espoused at least public anti-capitalist beliefs. And then Luigi Mangione, who is I would say probably a guy who watches more video podcasts about business than anybody I've ever interacted with in my life. But I would say can be fairly assessed as not being a left-wing figure. Although many people got mad at us when we assessed that ourselves. It's come out that it's very much the case. And so and then like the guy who shot at the ICE agents in Dallas in July of last year, not the Prairieland incident we're going to be talking about, but a sort of like lone wolf sniper incident. That I don't think that guy was ever proven to be like particularly left-wing either. It's just they're kind of ascribing any incidents of violence that is maybe can be simpatico or portrayed as simpatico with left-wing beliefs as left-wing political violence.
Well, I think that's the one of the reasons they're able to do that is that over the past, I don't know, however many years, let's say since 2022, but don't quote me on that. That discursively, the right has done a lot of work in trying to kind of characterize what is characterize a leftist as someone who has just a very kind of like an orientation toward the world. right? Rather than as a part of a group or as a part of, is like a card carrying member in any kind of traditional political association sense, right? Is someone who has a sort of worldview or presents themselves in the world or takes advantage of certain things in the world or not, or has a certain, I don't know, like it became more of a descriptive category,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of work, not in a conspiratorial sense, but like discursively, a lot of work done and a lot of people's sort of beliefs organized around a concept that now is getting really like weaponized by this administration.
Yeah, I think that if you pay attention to them talking about this sort of civilizational struggle, that really factors in what you're saying there. They portray the left as not necessarily being an assemblage of people who believe in whatever Marxian subgroup or ideology, but like really somebody who is just against Western civilization. So anti-capitalism isn't necessarily the primary motivating force. It is insofar as that like capitalism is a symptom of Western civilization, but like the real enemy at its core is this sort of quote unquote Western civilization that Rubio and Miller are the protectors of. And Miller talks about a lot in his speech, these freaks. If you look at a picture of one of these demonstrations, you see all these freaks. And listen, I have a lot of qualms with how some people on the left present themselves, which is in a very subcultural way. But it's clear that there is a certainly very fascist quality, especially to Miller's speech. Rubio's speech was almost more like regular conservative, I guess, but
Right.
Miller's was certainly more out and out fascist.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through a slight little timeline here, although that breaks down later in the episode, just out of necessity, of some of the incidents that have kind of led up to this ministerial, which again, there was like 66 countries there. I don't really know.
By the way,
exactly.
almost all of the countries were like, what are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
they invited all of these countries to this ministerial, and Rubio's like, we need your help to defeat the global left-wing octopus,
Yes.
basically. And all these other countries are like, we don't really think that's a big deal. We don't know what you're talking about. We're not
Yeah.
really facing a lot of left-wing violence in our countries, right? And it's since come out that Rubio's basically been like, well, you guys still want weapons contracts, you guys still want, help from the US on X, Y, and Z. You're gonna join our little club.
Fall in line.
And they're really like, fall in line, be a good vassal, root out left-wing communism.
So back to July 4th of 2025, there was a noise demonstration that sort of went awry in Prairieland, Texas. It originated out of a signal chat, which we'll get into a little bit later, called Fun Day 1. It's clear that there were some wires crossed in terms of what the participants in that signal chat and then in another larger, more public one where information about the demonstration was shared. There were some wires crossed between participants as to what that noise demonstration would entail. But they basically figured they would go and shoot fireworks at this ice facility, make some noise, bring some maybe strobe lights and stuff like that. The actual night goes pretty awry, I would say. There is a noise demonstration. There's some vandalism that occurs in the parking lot. Some people spray paint out some cars and, I think like slash a few tires. But then the cops show up at the behest of the ICE employees, and there's sort of a chase that's happening when they're chasing down one of the protesters. A cop draws his gun, and one of the protesters draws his rifle, and there is a shootout. An officer was hit, and I believe returns fire. I believe he hit the guy who was shooting his gun. And a bunch of people flee, and over the ensuing weeks, most of them or I believe all of them, are caught, and a bunch of other people are caught and charged as accessories after the fact that weren't even there. In the immediate aftermath, this is portrayed as basically like an ambush on ICE officers. Like ICE was lured out of their compound by these demonstrators and then ambushed by masked riflemen hiding in the woods. ICE even put out a video calling it the Prairieland ambush.
It's worth just as some background to this is going on at the time when a lot of neighborhoods or outside of these ICE facilities are kind of organizing to send messages to the detainees, especially
Yeah.
the children, are sneaking letters back and forth and trying to get kids in touch with lawyers and and a lot of stuff in daylight and being covered in mainstream newspapers and not in any kind of, I don't know how to say, it's not in a much more pacifist kind of approach, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of happening in the backdrop of this, just to kind of say where this sort of came from and then took it in a different direction. You know what I
Yes,
mean? With the
yeah.
kind of noise demonstration.
Yeah. And, there's, I think 19 people I know. There's 19 people arrested total.
Yeah.
We'll have more on that later. But it becomes sort of a incident that will be pretty central to the government's kind of news strategy and outlook on the left. And then, of course, on September 10th, 2025, a day that will live, Charlie Kirk was shot by somebody.
Allegedly shot.
Yes. Charlie
He
Kirk.
left this mortal coil.
Yes. Charlie Kirk had sort of this emphysemic kind of reaction to a bullet striking. A gun went off and a bullet struck a neck.
Yeah. Or did it?
Yes. Well,
Perhaps it came up from the inside and went out. No one's floated that one, have they?
It's true. But yeah, maybe he was shooting actually from a gun hidden in his neck. He was shooting outwards towards a hidden assassin.
I'm just saying we got to entertain all the options.
We don't know. It is rather striking that such a cut and dry martyr style incident for the right was immediately basically taken in the hands of Candace Owens and used to completely destroy certain segments of right-wing unity. And it has been really tremendous to watch.
It's crazy how much has changed since then. Usha had the new baby.
Oh, God.
Which, by the way,
thank you for
as
bringing
someone
that
who
up.
also just had a new baby, and as someone who, along with you, loves to talk about baby names.
Yep.
Alec with a K.
Oh, with a K?
I mean, with a C. It's with a C.
Okay.
But still, I don't know what's better, Trebek or Baldwin. Alec for a baby. I don't know how I feel about this.
Well, let me see. What his other kids' names are?
Alec Vance.
It's Ewan,
Alec Vance.
Mirabelle, Alec, and then they let Usha name one, Vivek. Vivek
You don't know.
Vance.
That could have been, that's Vance. He was like, I'm going to name him after my boy.
Fuck it. Vivek Vance. VV. That's not bad, actually.
What
Vivek
if the
Vance?
middle name is Ramaswamy?
Vivek Ramaswamy Vance. God. Vivek Vance. Are we liking that?
That is a name of a prescription drug.
Wow, that is, yeah. That's definitely going to help with some hypertension.
That's like, oh my God, all the girls at NYU are on Vivek Vance.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I go in there, and I take it. All right. Then on September 22nd, 2025, this is only 12 days after Charlie was killed.
Allegedly
Killed, because we don't know.
He's still here.
The Trump put out an executive order designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization.
We talked about this when it happened, I believe.
Yes, it's a fairly short EO.
Yes.
Legally a little, let's say
non-binding,
not non-binary. Yeah, it's not quite the most legally robust document that I've ever seen. But would you read from it here?
Yeah. Antifa. Do you remember the video of him going Antifa?
Yes.
Sorry. We really just forgot about that one. Antifa is a militarist anarchist enterprise that explicitly calls for the overthrow of the United States government, law enforcement authorities, and our system of law. It uses illegal means to organize and execute a campaign of violence and terrorism nationwide to accomplish these goals. This campaign involves coordinated efforts to obstruct enforcement of federal laws through armed standoffs with law enforcement, organized riots, violent assaults on immigration and customs enforcement, and other law enforcement officers, and routine doxing, 1x, of and other threats against political figures and activists.
No such thing as routine doxing.
Also, I would love to know what the legal definition of doxing is.
I think it genuinely depends on the state. I think it's a state level thing.
Yeah, I would not. It's very weird to see doxing in an executive order.
Well,
I'm
it's
just gonna
also
say, though I
mean,
shouldn't be surprised.
This came out also, of course, in September of 2025, so last year. Remember that was like when ICE agents had been wearing masks all year, and everyone was like, why can't we see who these guys are? Like, unlike every other law enforcement agency whose regular street cops are have name tags and badge numbers and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, what is this, France?
We have masked police everywhere, and they were like, that's doxing. You actually, cool.
Yeah. Antifa recruits, trains, and radicalizes young Americans to engage in this violence and suppression of political activity, and then employs elaborate means and mechanisms to shield the identities of its operatives, conceal its funding sources and operations in an effort to frustrate law enforcement and recruit additional members. Individuals associated with and acting on behalf of Antifa further coordinate with other organizations and entities for the purpose of spreading, fomenting, and advancing political violence and suppressing lawful political speech. This organized effort designed to achieve policy objectives by coercion and intimidation is domestic terrorism.
A legally fraught term, we could say.
Yeah. So right after this, around November, 4 European Antifa linked, that's a quote from the government, groups were designated FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations. Now, FTOs, of course, are actual legal designations that come with, an organization is designated an FTO, and it opens up a lot of various enforcement mechanisms that the government can kind of take with that, right? Which we'll talk
the
about.
legal tools.
Yeah. This included an Antifa group, Antifa Ost, or Hammerband. I like that one better. Hammerband from Germany. I actually don't know. Informal Anarchist Federation / the International Revolutionary Front, FAI, from Italy. And then 2 Greek groups.
Oh, yeah. The Greeks get crazy.
Armed Proletarian Justice and Revolutionary Class Self-Defense.
I think, just to be clear here, like Antifa in Europe is like a whole other animal than it is here. You know what I mean? Like there is a much more recent, I guess like the anarchism was pretty big here in the 90s, but like, I don't know how to describe it. Like Europe is just smaller. And so like these things are kind of all packed together more. And there are these kind of like big brawls between like whatever right-wing, like Golden Dawn members and like Antifa guys in Greece and stuff like that. Like there just is a lot more of like,
as there have historically been.
Exactly. Like it's definitely
all in there.
I mean, anybody who's been to Europe, if you walk around a major city, like you see Antifa stuff everywhere, just in a way that like just does not exist in the US at all.
Yeah.
And so it's like a completely different thing.
Yeah. And again, so this FTO status, I mean, this is what triggers the kind of like material support liability, those legal mechanisms we were talking about. And this is kind of how, as we're going to explain, it becomes a tool against domestic funders and supporters, because that domestic designation, the one that they're like, oh, Antifa is domestic terrorism, that's like not, that does not have any kind of like statutory teeth.
Yeah.
There's nothing really there for them to enforce. And so once they move this to the outside, they can then use it to operate on the inside.
So September 25th, just a few days later, the government puts out NSPM 7. That is the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence.
So this is a presidential directive. This is
Yeah.
coming from the executive branch. There's no congressional vote or anything, no debate in any kind of legislative sense. Trump just signed it. Then it became the law, not law, but it became the directive of the
Mhm.
land. We'll talk about what that means. I want to say that, just to again reiterate this, with the FTO designation, right? That has to do with international groups, but there's no federal domestic terrorism designation regime, like legal regime, like
Yeah.
you said. So Congress has never like created an equivalent to what the State Department has for FTOs. And the reason is because it would inevitably run up against First Amendment shit. I
Yeah.
mean, especially speech and association. I mean, that's like right there,
Yes.
you know? And the only thing that's really come close previously would be the Patriot Act. But that's really more about investigative purposes, right? Because it's about surveillance, really, rather than a kind of like standalone crime or like criminal designation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are obviously like pretty immediate and severe free speech implications with this stuff. But, sort of harkening back to Miller's speech, I think they're aware of that, and they just kind of figure that they can kind of bowl over that with the actual force of the federal government behind it.
Well, it's always just do it until the Supreme Court says you can't, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically like how the executive operates. So, if the sort of Antifa designation from the previous, like, domestic terror naming of Antifa, whatever, I don't even know what to call it because it doesn't have any like statutory
The statement,
like,
the
weight.
presidential statement
Yes.
designating in the government's view
Yeah.
of Antifa as a terrorist organization.
Like, if that doesn't hold that much legally, then what NSPM 7 does, because it also cannot create a legal regime on its own, but what it does is it basically repurposes authorities that the executive already has and like kind of wires them together towards this specific political project,
Yes.
right? Or political target. And so what this is like from the NSPM 7, it says like common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, race, and gender, and hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. So when I say when it's like stitching together or like directing these like executive powers, what I mean is there are joint terrorism task force, right? So they can now, or what they now are doing is redirecting those task forces towards this domestic, like quote to quote them, rooting out this domestic enemy.
Yeah.
Okay. There's also the Treasury and the IRS, and they are now tasked with tracing and, quote, disrupting the funding sources, we're going to talk about that, of organizations that they're investigating. This is the kind of, Miller in his speech talked a lot about defunding and debanking, which is always fun to kind of see these like pop political words show up on the other side.
Yeah. Well, it was also, I mean, it's that was such a big talking point during the Biden administration about debanking
Yes.
both of like alt-right figures and Laura
And
Loomer.
just like, A16Z or
I
whatever.
was gonna say, and Mark Andreessen's crypto buddies.
And the other big one is FARA and tax
Yeah.
law. And some of that gets into the weeds with the Form 990s, which are what nonprofits file. We're going to talk about that. And that goes into this sort of material support logic. Another, I mentioned the kind of like discursive work that's been done over this past years. And one of them is this kind of this boogeyman of the NGO octopus, right? And some of this like leaned on those classic kind of Soros anti-Semitic I don't know. They weren't memes back then, I guess, but you know what I'm talking about? Like the kind of like
he's controlling everything or
Soros is
whatever.
like, "Rrr," it's a kind of like, Charlie Hebdo style cartoon
Yeah.
in my head. But I feel like that kind of took on a different shape and tone over these past few years when the kind of NGO complex became a sort of explanatory, I don't know, like a tool for explaining the left-wing cultural power.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that a lot of this kind of came to a head in 2020 as well, because there was, I mean, first of all, there's been a tendency ever since, I guess, the 1960s, although even before that in certain forms, of so-called radicals who are radicals for a long time. And then they're like, well, I guess I've just been a radical for like 20 years. Like, that's my resume. I guess I'll just go work at an NGO, or I'll start an NGO. And there is this like NGOification of the left. So I actually very much dislike NGOs myself for maybe some similar reasons that they do, probably some different ones. But there is a real tendency for left-wing movements to actually be co-opted by these NGOs, take money from them, or people professionalize in certain ways, or you see even just debacles like the Black Lives Matter Global Foundation or whatever, kind of become essentially like businesses or something like that, rather than political movements, but with maybe the veneer of politics on them, or a way to actually affect politics of movements, but really in a sense like co-opting for the people that are already paying their check. So like whatever Soros funded or Rockefeller or whatever other funded groups, there are kind of a lot of left-wing groups funded by these people. They fund lots of bullshit, write all these grants and shit like that. And it's funny because I would say that these organizations almost certainly de-radicalize more people than they radicalize, but they have this veneer of radicalism. And that is, I think, what is most offensive to maybe the people who are writing this stuff.
The other thing is that like these networks exist on the right. And I say that not in a sort of like hypocrisy, like it's hypocritical. I'm not saying that. My point in bringing this up is that this is how political work is structured in the United States. Speech, money, influence. This is how civil society, the kind of big genre of political association and groups and mediation between the state, capital, and people, this is how it's built out in the United States. And I'm going to get in the weeds in a while about some tax stuff, only because it's important to understand that our system has grown. Like this is the tax system incentivized and produced this, right? And so these right-wing attacks are both attacks on left-wing infrastructure, left-wing liberal, whatever you want to call it, but it's just political infrastructure, right? Like it's just an attack on civil society itself, partly because, I do think that your point about the kind of left liberal NGOification is very true. And I do think it is much more robust on that side of the aisle than on the right, which has more traditional, aside from like the Coat Network, kind of like sprawling system, the traditional kind of like associations and civil society organizations on that side were like churches.
Yeah.
And those sorts of like, Schlafly groups, those types of things. I mean, look, Charlie, perfect example. But a lot of that has been hollowed out over the years as people have like kind of left those groups. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, TPUSA is still very big. And, there's whatever, Moms for Liberty and all those kind of things. But like, it is definitely, I don't think it's as, or the money operates in different ways on the right than it does,
Yes.
I would say, on the left, for sure.
Yes. And it definitely, the kind of left NGO pipeline that you're kind of talking about, especially out of the university system,
Oh, yeah.
is much more, is much thicker than I think it is on the right.
I think it's
However,
also
my point being, this is just kind of like how politics is done in the United States.
Yeah. I think you also you can't miss that there's a, I guess, more respectability in working in these like left wing or liberal NGOs than there would be in working for something like TPUSA. And so I think there is that kind of like strange, almost class resentment there, even though obviously these people are part of the same class. But like there is a that I think that definitely can't be discounted.
I mean, we produce young people, we meaning society, that want to change the way that society is. And these are the pathways that are available, right?
Yeah.
Before we kind of get more into detail on a lot of this stuff, I want to just like flag something really, really quick. So there's a bill in Congress called Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act, which I was like, damn, American hostages, news to me.
Yeah.
This actually was brought forth in Congress prior to Trump, which I do think is worth flagging. It ended up dying in the Senate after Trump was reelected. But it would basically give the Treasury Secretary unilateral power to designate 501c3s as terrorist supporting organizations. This is kind of like shocking because it would just centralize. It would just say, okay, the Treasury Secretary, just like one determination that would be able to strip tax exempt status rather than what the current system is, which is very long and annoying and like has to deal with like there's like 30-day waiting period where someone can like public comment is available and people like debate, and that this
abundance fixes this. Abundance fixes this.
And this would completely change it so that any Treasury Secretary could be like, oh, your little nonprofit, boom, you support terrorism, can't do it. And the Treasury Secretary doesn't need to provide evidence for their decisions because they can just be like, oh, that information is classified because this has to do with terrorism, whatever. Apparently, this had full support from Democrats until Trump took office. And then they're like, what? Maybe we should wait on this. The GOP tried to pass it, and like the ACLU and the EFF and all those kinds of groups, lobbied to make sure it didn't get passed. But I just want to like, people are kind of bringing it up again, might reintroduce it. And it is a little shocking and something worth keeping an eye on.
So, okay, what exactly is happening here with NSP 7?
We don't really know.
NSPM 7.
It's a tough one to say.
Why can't I say it?
Because it's NSPM 7. It's like one too many things.
National Socialist Prime Minister 7.
It should be like one. It should just be NSP 7.
NSP 7.
Or NSM 7. No. What about NPM? No, that one's tough.
Yeah, that's difficult.
It's just one too many. It is completely shrouded in mystery. So reporters have basically, they've had to kind of cobble together what's actually happening from a bunch of leaked memos and testimony. In February of this year, Pam Bondi confirmed to the House Judiciary that there is a domestic terrorist list.
Okay.
That's something that we didn't know before. And part of NSPM 7 implementation, like part of the memo, did direct the FBI to compile a list of groups engaged in acts that may constitute domestic terrorism. So that the FBI has a list of groups that they consider domestic terrorists. That report was first issued in January of this year. No one's seen it, but we do know that it is updated every 30 days. So that's something we know.
Interesting.
Now, The Guardian obtained an internal FBI memo from back in November of last year, which described that there were multiple active FBI investigations related to NSPM 7 in 27 different FBI locations. But again, we don't know. We don't know. I'm going to be honest, that's about what we know.
Yeah.
There was some reporting on questioning that I think it was from February of this year. FBI agents approached a former member, I guess. I don't know if he or they called themselves a member, but we'll say member of Extinction Rebellion, NYC.
Oh God, I forgot
which
about
I had
that.
forgotten about them. And I think this person did too because they hadn't been involved in any action in 2 years. But they were approached by two FBI agents, both of which had business cards that said they were part of the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force. And they showed up at their house in upstate New York. And they said, oh, we've got some questions about Extinction Rebellion NYC. You're not in any trouble. And then the guy was like, I'm not talking to you. Close the door. And that was it.
That is a good actually, this should really be underlined. If that ever happens to you, do exactly that. Be like, I'm not speaking with you. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And close the door. And I would say call the ACLU or somebody like that afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you should repeat that, Brace.
Yeah, I would say call the ACLU after you close the door on any cops or FBI or anybody, or really any solicitor for that matter, who comes to your door.
You don't need to buy that Fabuloso.
Exactly. You know what you do? If anybody comes to your door, call the cops, and when the cops get there, call your lawyer. Then you call the lawyer. But I mean, I would say, maybe call a more specific lawyer, but I think that's a good starting point there. But you do not ever have to talk to the police. You can just say no. And if they say that, oh, you have to talk to us, they might say all sorts of things. Just say, I am not speaking to you. Thank you. Have a good day. And then get a lawyer there immediately. That should be your number one task, is to get a lawyer, at least on the horn.
So this Joint Terrorism Task Force, there's a body called the JTF Vanguard. This is a body under DOJ. This is a group under DOJ. It's apparently stood up around March of this year. And this is basically all we know, that it's led by two prosecutors who report directly to Todd Blanche. And they're working cases by applying conspiracy and RICO and material support frameworks to protest cases. Okay. Now, this is kind of again, taking legal frameworks that have always been used on things like the mafia and using it on people doing political work. And I think a lot of people maybe remember we talked about Cop City. We're going to talk about the Prairieland case a little bit later. You're going to see how some of this kind of legal stuff is kind of popping up. One of the prosecutors is a guy named Brian W. Lynch.
Okay.
He used to blog for a website called The American Thinker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to say that's a great name for that kind of blog.
Well,
it's very descriptive. If you said, oh, he blogs for The American Thinker, I'd be like, I know exactly what you are talking about. I know exactly what you were talking about. And yes, his most recent post was about COVID.
And I think it should be mentioned that he was, of course, at January 6th.
Well, there's that too.
And it's just I don't think he was arrested, but it's so funny. It's all of this under the backdrop of especially the Prairieland stuff. It's they did storm the Capitol,
which is still available for purchase.
Mm-hmm. But and then they were all pardoned.
Well, you get your boy in there. Look, I will say this about that. We've always said on this show, you got to take care of your boys.
You got to take care. You got to take care. You got to pay your guys.
You got to pay your guys. And I'm going to say this. Look, Trump, as Mr. Mafia himself, knows, allegedly, by others in the newspapers, that you got to take care of your boys. And look, the sad fact of the situation is those were his guys.
Those were his guys. I'm
and
sure he wish he had better guys.
He said that because I think that he says, I don't know those people. But I would say that if you're pardoning them for those actions, those are your guys.
Those are your guys. Those are your guys. And there was a little bit of dissent around that. I met a couple of guys at CPAC who were like, okay, we got pardoned, but we actually want compensation too. And I'm like, guys, don't
What? Compensation for what?
Don't push it. For spending years in jail.
What was that guy's website? Was like we're innocent men, or like good innocent men.
We're just normal men. We're just innocent
It
men.
was called like lonelygoodmen.com or something like that. It was just like, it was, they were sort of pathetic figures. There's a whole network, Liz, of like halfway houses for these guys. I don't think a lot of these guys were doing too good before they went in the pen.
The other thing that we know about the NSPM 7 is that in the FBI 2027 budget, there's a line item for the Joint Mission Center, the NSPM 7 Joint Mission Center, that describes as kind of a permanent FBI hub that integrates personnel from 10 federal agencies. This is from the budget. It says it's going to proactively identify networks and prosecute domestic terrorist and related criminal actors by integrating intelligence, operational support, and financial analysis. Now, this is coming alongside an FBI budget request that is quite large. The FBI wants $12.5 billion, which is close to a $2 billion increase. The largest counterterrorism spending increase in years, with Kash Patel coming out and saying there's going to be a 300% increase in domestic terrorist investigations. So all of this is kind of helping us understand exactly what NSPM 7 is doing, because we don't actually know. Everything else is a mystery.
I mean, we can kind of see. So in June, just last month, there was 15 people in Minnesota arrested as part of Direct Action Minnesota. And federal prosecutors came out and called them Antifa, said these are Antifa members here in Minnesota. And so I think that's where this is going. Like they're sort of inventing these kind of Antifa cases. And I think a very good example of that is the Prairieland trial itself.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of reporting on Prairieland. I actually started assembling an episode a couple of months ago, and then I think something else. I think the war in Iran started, and I ended up doing that. Can't remember. There was something that sort of superseded it. To go back a little bit, so the noise demonstration that was originally scheduled for July 4th came out of a Signal group chat called Fun Day 1 that was with a bunch of people that sort of knew each other from kind of the left-wing scene in I believe, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Again, it's clear that some people had some different ideas of what was maybe expected or what was going to happen than others did. Although it doesn't appear that anybody was like looking necessarily to get into a gun battle. But the issue of guns was brought up. And of course, it's Texas. They're much more normal there than they are in the coastal elite cities, where they're only used in the commission of crimes. And some people in the chat had been in the local Socialist Rifle Association, SRA.
Is this like a big, I don't know. Is this a big like network of groups across the U.S.?
I mean, there are, like, I always, like, I mean, no disrespect. I'm sure that we have people that listen to the show that are involved in that group, but like, you always, like, the only people you hear coming from that are like this sort of thing. And then like, I think Graham Plantner was a member of the SRA. Like,
really?
I don't know. I have some qualms. I have no idea what the SRA does, to be completely honest. I actually, like, literally, I don't know what they do. But like, sometimes when people sort of like play pretend training, stuff like that, like I think gun stuff is fun, but I think the problem is it's like you see this, and you see this on the left and the right. It's like they sort of like act out these scenarios in these training situations a bunch, but you don't really get a chance to use it. And so you might be looking subconsciously in the back of your mind to go use it. If that makes any sense, to use the sort of things that you've learned there. I don't know. But I have no idea. Again, I actually have no idea what SRA does. But I think it's just part of my overall thing against LARP, I guess what you could call it. It's like, it's when people act like they're about to be Mr. Big Badass Rambo when the reality is like situations call for maybe a little more seriousness than that. I don't know if it necessarily equips people for that. I actually don't, but again, like there wasn't SRAs anywhere I've lived. I've never interacted with them, so I have no idea. I'm using basically what I learned from context clues. A lot of the later case hinged on one member of the chat, an ex-Marine, ex-Republican actually, named Benjamin Song, who was talking about bringing guns to the protests and kept saying, "I'm not going back to jail." And I have a little piece of advice for anybody out there. Do not text things like that, basically to anybody. And if you're doing it, even if you're sort of doing it as like a bit in things like this, don't do it. Don't text people things like that. I'm not going back to jail. As you can imagine, that was brought up at the trial. I'm bringing a rifle because I'm not going back to jail. Because the implication obviously is that you'd rather go out in a blaze of gunfire.
And also that you knew you were doing something.
Yeah, exactly. There was some sort of premeditation or intent there. And I think part of my problem with some of the stuff like the training stuff, and again, I'm not even just talking about the left-wing stuff, is like when actually like things happen, a kinetic situation occurs, I don't know if that really necessarily equips you for that. Like there's a difference between like some military training. I'm not even talking about anything that I've gone through, but like military training that like the US Army or whatever does, and like drills and stuff with people, because there's a certain level of tension and cortisol spikes and yada, 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 that can make, you have to know how to like interact cohesively with the group. And I'm not so sure that was occurring in this situation. He shared a YouTube short on suppressive fire with the group. And this is, again, brought up in the case. And again, I got to tell you guys, don't be sharing YouTube shorts on suppressive fire, not just because it'll be used in the imminent court case against you, but also that's not going to teach people what that is. First
of all, ask ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Learn the proper way.
And go on private browsing. They'll never catch you there. No, but like, first of all, suppressive fire is just where you shoot at a guy to keep his head down. I don't really even know if you need to watch a YouTube video for that. You got to just explain it to somebody. But like, it's just not, that's what I'm saying here. Like, there's a degree of amateurness here that I think does not, that doesn't serve the people that was, or maybe anybody who is in this situation who is doing suppressive fire, because that did occur. So again, that Signal chat, fun day one, mostly had activists who knew each other, but they made a flyer for this noise demonstration on the 4th of July that they had talked about doing, and then put it into a different, bigger Signal chat of activists from all over the area, and a lot of whom they did not know. And everybody in these groups, by the way, I don't know if everybody, but most people in these groups kind of go by nicknames. You have a nickname on Signal. And so people didn't necessarily know each other's true identities. Although when they met each other, they would certainly be able to now match someone's screen name with their face, and then yada, yada, yada. That leads somewhere quite nasty in a very short time. And again, it seems abundantly clear, despite Benjamin Song's, couple of comments here, that literally all of these people did just think they were doing a noise demonstration. Like, it doesn't seem like I'm trying to be as fair and neutral as possible here. It does not seem like these people were going in there to go have a big showdown, gun battle, or ambush. If they had done that, I think that even if you were trained somewhat amateurishly, you probably would have gone about this different. So they had a gear check the day before at what is described as an LGBTQ plus house. I can't remember what it's called. It's called like the big gay house or something like that. And that, it's funny because like a gear check is probably like, they were like, oh, here's all our fireworks that we're going to use. But they're making it sound like the prosecutors try to make it sound like they were like, it was like John Wick going into the armory in the back of the John Wick Hotel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wick. May I suggest the Benelli M4?
And like checking out the Benellis and shit like that.
It's also like if they all meant to do that, I mean, it probably just given everything, it probably would have been in the text messages.
Yeah, dude, I'm just like, I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
like,
you're just going to say this one thing, but you're not going to say anything else. That's like, I don't think the OPSEC was that.
It is so obvious that like these people were not going there to have a fucking gun battle. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like, it's just, it is. And I'm not just saying that because maybe, we might have, if they're anarchists, we probably don't actually agree on all that much. Well, we agree on some things, but probably not most things. But like, I really, it just does not seem like that. It doesn't seem like that at all. And a lot of the text messages were released in court. I followed this stuff. There's been the Prairieland Support Committee website has been really great tracking what happened in court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I read a lot of it as contemporaneously when it was happening. It really seems like this is a noise demonstration that like some shit went down. So they get to the ICE facility again at 10 p.m., various cars there, and some people from the bigger signal chat show up. And there isn't really a cohesive plan. And that's like kind of, I'm not going to say fine, because obviously like they should have had a cohesive plan, not for shooting anybody, but like for maybe getting away from the police or whatever.
I
but
just
like
don't think that they thought any of this was going to happen.
yes, it's clear they did not think this was going to happen.
Yeah.
They let off some fireworks. Everyone's kind of like, there's some people who are in communication with other people, it looks like, but like, everyone's kind of like, there's several people on their own. Some people go to the parking lot and start fucking up cars. Some people are just like shooting fucking fireworks. They probably bought at a Texas fireworks stand kind of near the facility. ICE later said the facility was attacked. There's no damage. They had to admit that there actually wasn't any damage. There's just like fireworks going off. ICE employees come running out. The cops come running out. One of the cops raises his gun, like I said, and Benjamin Song raises his rifle and fires off a volley of shots. The cop returns fire. It's unclear, again, if the cop was shot. There's some reporting that says he was shot, but Song's lawyers in the trial brought up that it could have been a ricochet, which is true because it does appear that Benjamin Song was trying to do suppressive fire. Suppressive fire, I got to tell you, is not a legally distinct thing. If you're shooting at somebody, if you're shooting at a cop, they're going to get you. And Song yells, "Get the guns," while this is happening. Nobody seems to listen to him because everyone's like, "I'm getting the fuck out of here." Song's rifle is hit by a cop's bullet and he drops it and he runs. Don't drop your rifle either. Everyone's running around like chickens with their damn heads cut off. Some people are escaping to the woods. Some people are driving in a car.
Oh.
Yeah, it's tough. Nobody else draws a gun, as far as I know. There's no other shots fired. So, okay, it's Prairieland 19. Prairieland, 19 people arrested. 10 are arrested that night. Some of the people who got arrested didn't even witness anything that went down. They were like, what? There was like, they like heard maybe shots or something, but they were like, they had no idea what was happening. They didn't know that people were shooting at each other, anything like that. The cops pull over one lady who's got Kevlar vests and 2 rifles in the back seat, plus a walkie-talkie. Again, no indication it's legal to have a rifle in Texas. There's no indication that she used the rifle. I mean, I shouldn't even say that's almost not strong enough language. She didn't use the rifle. There's a walkie-talkie there. Benjamin Song is able to flee into a sunflower field, which is sort of a romantic kind of place to flee to. And then he calls a bunch of friends from the SRA, the Socialist Rifle Association, to help him escape. He talks to them on Signal, and they all get arrested. Some of them try to sort of help him flee, but they all get arrested. So the first arrests come in sort of short succession. There's 2 cases here. There's the federal case, and then there's a state case as well. So the first arrest is actually the husband of one of the women that is arrested at Prairieland. So he wasn't there. He didn't know she was there. According to a long article in the Texas Monthly, he's actually like he's seen 28 days later, or 28 years later rather, and he's like in a fight with his wife. He doesn't even know he doesn't know where she is. I think he's like staying at a different place. She calls him from jail, and she's worried about pets, mortgage, stuff in the house, and he goes and gets a big box of anarchist zines out of their house and drives it to a house in Denton. So it's like a box. And it's like fucking, I don't know, some fucking zines, Voltaire or something. It's like insurrectionist zines. The cops are surveilling him. They're following him, and they pull him over and arrest him. They sort of think he has a bomb on him. This is, I think some people may have heard about a guy getting arrested for moving zines. And that is literally true, but it's not necessarily because of the content of the zines, although it also is actually, but it's because that was supposedly evidence, even though it's not evidence, it's, protected whatever speech stuff. And so he gets arrested. There is on July 10th, John Thomas is arrested. He wasn't at Prairieland. He actually had helped Benjamin Song escape somehow. He was, according to In Contempt, which I think is like an anarchist blog, he was the secretary of the local SRA chapter. And then a bunch of other SRA members who helped Benjamin Song get away are arrested. And John Thomas, at one point, the SRA secretary, had come to the house of an SRA member named Dario Sanchez and asked to be removed from Discord chats. Sanchez removes him. And then Sanchez's home is raided and he's arrested. And they like fly a quadcopter in there like he's fucking Sinwar or something. Like it's insane what they're going after these people.
I want to also just pause here for 1 second and say all the things that we've been mentioning, Signal, Discord, all these communication platforms where everyone thinks that they are either anonymous or doing or saying things in a protected arena. It's all being used against these people.
Yes. And people might think that Signal, okay, whatever, it auto deletes or you can delete the chats or whatever. You need a PIN to get in. The reality is that the cops can look at your notification list from your iPhone. And so, okay, maybe they can't see the messages that you sent, but they can see and go into the backlog of messages that you've received.
But also, not even just, what we're kind of describing too is that a lot of surveillance capabilities are unlocked with the legal structure that is being put in place right now with with this executive directive that opens up legal justifications for counterterrorist work. Okay. And so things that you think the cops can't do this, the cops can't do that. Well, no, actually this whole other kind of all this other stuff is available because of these legal justifications.
Exactly. And all of the stuff that we're talking about, even Signal chats or Discord, or the fact that several people were dressed in black clothing, or as the feds call it, black bloc, which is also just something you might want to wear at night if you're trying to do something that's some misdemeanors outside of an ICE facility. Those are all incorporated into the legal case against these people as signs that they were an Antifa. A woman named Jeanette Gehring, for instance, is arrested for having sewn a Faraday bag and given it to Song at one point. Faraday bag is just a bag that prevents cell phone signals from getting in or out. They're perfectly legal to own. You can buy them on Amazon. And she had given it to Song, and that was her supporting this domestic terrorist.
Yeah, they're saying that's material support.
Yes. And it becomes abundantly clear that the government is using this as a test case. So 8 of the defendants are charged with rioting, with material support for terrorists, a conspiracy to use and carry an explosive, and carrying of an explosive. Now, that explosive, again, was fireworks. I'm pretty sure, almost positive, that those were commercially available fireworks. These were not bombs or anything like this. They were literally fireworks. You can actually see the government put out stills from cameras in the ICE facility that they were actual fireworks. They were exploding in fireworks displays. And that corresponds with what they were talking about in the Signal chats, which is they wanted to put on a 4th of July show for the people in there. And again, in the Signal chats, at one point, somebody brings up hey, should we steal some U-Hauls and maybe free some of the prisoners? And everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're not doing that. And this is before One Battle After Another came out, by the way, because they definitely do that at the beginning of that, although in a much more spectacular way. But it's clear that any kind of adventurism that gets brought up in these chats from Song or from, I can't remember who brought up the U-Haul thing. Everyone's like, no, man, what are you talking about? We're not doing that. And the government is just actually, you were doing that. You were doing this ambush on purpose. Song is charged with all of those same charges: rioting, material support for terror, conspiracy, explosives, and carrying explosive. But he's also charged with attempted murder and several counts of discharging a firearm. There's 4 other people who are charged with attempted murder of the 8 defendants I mentioned before. 7 people plead guilty, and then 5 people start cooperating.
Mm.
And this is something to mention here. Buy the ticket, take the ride is how I think of things. If you are going to put yourself in a situation where you might cooperate, then never put yourself in that situation. You know what I mean? If you think that you don't have the mettle to do something, then you don't. You probably don't. That's fine. But it's better to be honest with yourself and maybe with people now. You don't have to tell everyone everything, but you maybe just, if someone's like, hey, let's go do this thing that carries great legal risk. If you think of yourself as the kind of person who is going to snitch on other people, and I'm not just talking about it in political ways, I'm talking about it in any part of your life, then don't do that thing. Just don't put yourself in that situation. You know what I mean? And so, the cops will use all kinds of tactics, illegal tactics. Then maybe they'll torture you. Maybe they'll beat you up. Okay, but that has happened to thousands, hundreds of thousands, not millions of people throughout history that didn't give up their friends. And people do often snitch in criminal situations. All the mafia snitch, all the gangster snitch, everyone snitches, but you should not snitch. Never use that as an excuse. Never, like that's always, you do become a rat. And there were 5 rats here. One of those rats switched sides. She went and she told them everything. She identified all these people from the signal chats. And then she recanted and said, actually, no, I'm recommitting my support. And I'm sorry, but you got the worst of both worlds. You snitched and you ratted. And now you're also
no takebacks.
No takebacks. And it's just, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, so there's all these people that show up again, like that weren't part of the initial chat. One of these guys is a guy named Nathan Bauman, who was in the bigger signal chat that the flyer was shared in. And he went by the name Bible. And he's described as saying that he had undocumented parents at risk of deportation, that he was a veteran activist. In reality, he was in fact a 20-year-old white boy from College Station, Texas, one of the worst named towns in the United States of America.
That's a tough one, yeah.
I know, it's really tough.
Yeah.
He caused most of the destruction in the parking lot, including writing "fuck you pigs" and slashing tires.
Wow.
So
It's
1 second,
case.
exactly.
It's an interesting case.
So 1 second in there, he's writing "fuck you pigs" on a wall. Immediately when the cops talk to him, he turns state's witness and cooperates fully. There's some allegations people have made that maybe he was a plant from the beginning. It was revealed in court that he was a podcaster. The prosecutor, in reply to that, said, let's unpack that.
You know what, though? That's a fair question.
It's a fair question. Let's unpack that. What do you mean by that? You're a podcaster?
Wait, what's his podcast?
I tried to look for it, but there's some other guy named Nathan Bauman who does like a podcast about mental health. And I actually could not find College Station Nathan Bauman's podcast. Maybe it went by a nom de guerre in it, or a nom de pod. The trial was presided over by old Judge Pittman, who was like this Southern judge style guy. He levied fines against the lawyers. He levied fines against, he was obviously like, it's a show trial. So he's like completely in the tank for the government's case. But he actually immediately declared a mistrial because one of the defense lawyers was wearing a shirt with MLK and Shirley Chisholm on it. And he's like,
that gets you a mistrial, huh?
not in my courtroom.
Funny enough, it was actually the Clippers t-shirt with Blake Griffin and MLK. And anyway,
Yeah.
it's a deep cut.
But he's like, not happening here. And he kept doing like Southern style sayings in it. The defendants were not just charged regularly. They were charged with belonging to an Antifa cell. Specifically, the government calls them the North Texas Antifa cell. And this is because of the group chats. This is because Signal is a way that Antifa communicates to each other. Notwithstanding, there was a giant scandal at the Pentagon because they added fucking Jonathan Chait or whoever, I can't remember who, Jeffrey Goldberg to one of fucking Pete Hegseth's dick showing chats to talk about Yemen or whatever. And Signal is like used by basically everybody at this. It's like it's American WhatsApp. They're like, okay, well they use Signal. They have black bloc clothing. And they have these zines, and that makes them Antifa, and Song was labeled as their leader, which was clearly not the case. It's clear that this was not a super planned out action, but the prosecutors wove this narrative that should be offensive to any, even if you're like, I'm a right-wing guy, fuck these Antifa guys, fuck whatever. Like, if you actually look at this case, the government is like obviously lying, which is bad that they're doing. They have this whole thing where Benjamin Song is their leader, and they're this hardened Antifa cell, and they were going there to ambush these cops. This doesn't at all cohere to the basic facts even the government itself presented at this case. And they're telling, again, this Antifa cell was like, we're going to go do this, and we're going to have this gear check, and we're radical extremists that are going to kill some ICE agents. And to that point, the prosecution actually called an expert witness, former Manhattan Institute guy, now who has a job at the Center for Security Policy, which 12 years ago, that same Center for Security Policy accused Grover Norquist of being in the Muslim Brotherhood.
Maybe we should hear them out on that one.
I actually was like, you know what? This is one of the things that I'm going to make fun of them for saying, but I'm like, then I'm going to look into it and it's true.
The thing for me is that's the most exciting thing I've heard from a Manhattan Institute guy in a while.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, yeah, let's talk about that. Maybe Grover Norquist is in the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
I would like to hear your theories.
Why can't Chris Rufo say interesting stuff like this instead of whatever the fuck else he does? I mean, teachers unions or whatever. So they had him come out and explain what Antifa was. I got to be honest, I don't know what the DFW or the Prairieland 19 rather lawyers were like, but like they should have. They tried to like object to him, and then the old Judge Pittman was like, nope, you should have done that at an earlier stage. The Manhattan boys coming on the Yankee. We're having the Yankee boy come up here and explain what this Antifa is. Song got 100 years in prison.
That's insane.
It's fucking insane. 6 of the defendants, mind you, precisely one person is alleged to have fired a gun that night or even held one, let alone pointed on even near a cop. That's Benjamin Song. Song got 100 years. 6 of the defendants got 50 years. A woman named Marciela Rueda, who had some guns in her backseat, the woman who got pulled over to the Kevlar vest and the couple of rifles in the backseat, got 70 years. One of the woman who ratted and then later recanted, she got 50 years. Several of the rats got 10 years. And Nathan Bauman only got 22 months. And it's funny because the rats are like, it's so absurd. Like it's such overcharging and such like, it's so egregious how this case went that it's one of those things where if this was another era, if this was the 1940s, this was the 1950s, 1960s, this actually would have had some celebrity lawyers up there. They have Clarence Darrow defending them there. That is not what went down in this case. These people got railroaded from a pretty shitty case in the government, and these are completely not only overcharged, but over-sentenced. And it's completely ridiculous. But this is sort of the first test case, and the government has explicitly called it that. I mean, I think, I mentioned like these Clarence Darrow there and some sort of movement lawyers, because that kind of leads into not only the next segment, but something that Miller mentioned in his ministerial speech. He said, one of the hallmarks of left-wing violence and terrorism is its completely pretextual and disingenuous appeal to civil liberties in an effort to shield its own violence. This is the tactic that the left always uses to try to protect itself from facing criminal punishment. It is essential that we are wise enough and strong enough to understand that these appeals must fall on deaf ears. When the leftist, who does not believe in freedom, who does not believe in civil rights, who does not believe in any ordered form of justice, protests that we are violating his rights, understand that he is lying to try to persuade people who are not closely following the political scene that some injustice has been perpetrated against him.
mean, this is like ghostwritten by Amy Therese. I mean, this is like
Yeah.
like when I say that the discursive work that was done over the past like however many years, this reads straight out of like vanguardist right-wing Twitter
Yeah.
with even this subject, the creation of this subject, the leftist, is shit that we've been hearing, whether it's like the feminized worldview or the fucking longhouse, or like, I would not be surprised if you hear that language coming out of Miller,
No.
right? Because that's like, this is the kind of this like political psychological profile that is trying to kind of draw up. It's just straight out of all of this bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of whatever fucking right-wing Twitter sphere that these people get this out of. It's I think it's notable though that he's saying if these people ever say that their civil rights are being violated, they're lying. And there is a sort of funny history, right, with the left or left-wing groups or Marxist groups being sort of the subject of civil rights, essentially civil rights trials. The reality is a lot of that was left in the 1950s, where a bunch of Communist Party USA members were arrested by the government in leadership positions and kind of abandoned by the liberals there. And liberalism kind of went a different direction. And that sort of reconstituted itself a little bit in the late 1960s. But this is saying that essentially any left-winger who says their civil rights are being violated, because that left-winger does not believe in these bourgeois civil rights, then you can just say that they're lying. You don't have to listen to that. There's no such thing. You actually cannot trespass against a left-wing person because they would trespass against you.
Exactly. There's no use in debating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other like kind of flip side to all this stuff is the kind of more, I don't know, not as if that was going after this concept of Antifa and in this sort of like criminal case, the Prairieland case, the other side that they're sort of, as they're kind of braiding together all of these legal avenues is this sort of going after this like NGO network that the right has sort of, everything from this includes any kind of like funding for these so-called like Antifa groups, right? But also like straight out of like Trump's mouth of like, we need to indict George Soros.
Yes.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so some of this is sort of like kind of very, I don't know, just like sort of like typical liberal dark money networks of like how campaigns and influence operations are financed. It's kind of interesting. There was this big piece in Wired last year on this Democratic funding network, Chorus, which is the nonprofit arm of kind of a massive liberal influencer marketing platform called the Arabella Advisors Network. Okay, they all have names like this. And it's a sort of for-profit consultancy group that's founded by this guy, Eric Kessler, who is like an old Clinton guy, big DC philanthropy guy. He's now manages several different 501c3s that have names like 1630, New Venture, Hopewell. I mean, they're all just like, what, you see this on a business card, you'd be like, sure, whatever, man.
Okay, the Hopewell Fund.
Exactly. This is what I think Wired called it the largest dark money machine on the left. And, I'm going to go through this because it gets us into the right's newest attacks on the Singham network, what they would call the Singham network.
Yeah.
But first off, why do they call it dark money? That's the 990s, right? What I mentioned, the form that every tax-exempt org files publicly. And that is what shows revenue, expenses, all the grants that go out, the top contractors, what officers are paid, etc. That's all filed publicly. Now, there's ways that these groups are able to defeat specific disclosure. And this has always been the kind of like, we got to go after campaign financing because we don't know where this money is going. We don't know who's funding all this, right? This is kind of a classic argument against a lot of this stuff. So there are, forms that are filed with the IRS that aren't disclosed publicly. So what we can only see publicly is where money goes, but not where it came from.
Yeah.
right? So Chorus is technically a project inside a group called 1630.
The 1630 Project.
Yes, which means that Chorus itself doesn't file its own disclosure. It's just a line item under this other group. And this is how these kind of like shell organizations are structured. When I said at the top of the episode that our tax system incentivizes this, that's what I mean, right? It's not like people are like, this is some new thing. Our tax structure has said, well, if you do all of this, this is how you can hide how a lot of this gets moved around, right? How a lot of this money gets moved around. And so you have one piece of paper with just some line items, and it's how dozens of kind of like pop-up influence groups can get spun out, or they're just immediately wound down without there being any kind of paper trail of like what went in and out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this going on right now. I've like kind of been red pilled on this lately. It's like that I think that basically any mainstream commentator on like liberal or conservative is being paid by a group like this, because like that huge Brad Parscale thing with like he's being paid by
Yes.
Israel to pay
Well,
Americans.
that's a FARA thing, which is
well,
interesting. Well, it's
FARA
not a FARA
just-
thing because
you
it's
can't-
Israel, but
Yeah.
it is a FARA thing.
FARA violations. Well, Trump said that they weren't going to prosecute FARA stuff anymore, of course, except if it comes from a country they don't like. But yeah, like Brad Parscale was paying Eyal Jacobi or whatever $7,000 a month to tweet. All that shit I think is happening like this. Or who's that? Juliana, the big old Democrat lady from Texas. Like all these people are just being paid by dark money groups like this to fucking tweet and to go on podcasts.
Well,
and to,
remember
like,
the
do-
tenant media stuff?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Named after one of the and she's back. The tenant media lady is back. She was at the White House. This is somebody who was being paid by Russia to. And I'm not even trying to be whatever Mr. Mueller here. It was like completely this insane scam where these people were getting paid, and then Tim Pool was getting like what was it, 30,000 an episode or something?
Yeah, it was something insane.
It's something totally fucking crazy. And there was a court case that was opened and then it was dropped. And now she's back here at the White House. I mean, there's just no consequences for anybody except people the government doesn't like.
And this is how but this is how it works. I mean, this is like how influence networks and social media networks are set up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I don't really know how we could talk about how you can like nip it in the bud or try to disincentivize these things, but it's also kind of like all built into the system.
Yeah.
You know? So this Wired investigation goes into specifically how they were like paying influencers through Chorus, this like Democratic network, right? And this is a quote from it. Will you read this? Because
In a private group chat in June, dozens of Democratic political influencers discussed whether to take advantage of an enticing opportunity. They were being offered $8,000 per month to take part in a secretive program aimed at bolstering Democratic messaging on the internet.
this is again a group chat, by the way. So we got group chats everywhere.
And I want to be clear here. I am technically part of one group chat which shares news on Israel stuff. That's it. And I don't even say anything really in there. It's just
And
like
you don't even get
news
paid
shit.
for it.
But I'm like, how many people are in group chats in ways that I cannot even fathom how they are? People just on their phones 30 hours a day, tip tapping in these Discord
First of
chats
all,
and these group chats. And
Yes.
it's just absurd
and also,
to me.
like, that is political association now.
yeah.
So this is how.
All right,
peop-
Anton Yeager.
No, but I'm just saying this is like political organization.
No, you're right. You're absolutely correct. Like this is so, all of this shit is happening. Are we just completely, should we just be in more group chats?
So I just
I
want to
wanna
say this
be.
because I got to bring this up. This is from the Wired piece. The people in this group chat included a reality TV star from the show Survivor,
Not impressive.
which is like, what? Survivor?
50 seasons, not impressive. That's like
Then-
thousands of people.
And this is just, I'm quoting them, a non-binary TikToker named Lorenzo.
Wow, that's curious. That spelling, it's like
Lorenzo.
Laurenenzo.
Someone who posts under the name @Women in America.
Okay, mea culpa, that is me.
And this is a direct quote, a Gen Z news influencer who has been called the Gen Z Walter Cronkite. A content creator who runs an American Girl doll themed pro DNC meme account. Which I got to say, it takes all kinds.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Clearly it does, and this is what politics in America is. So the rules were you get the money so long as you don't acknowledge that you're being hired to do influence operations.
Okay.
Which I do think. I mean, Wired phrases like puts it as like, isn't that crazy? They can't disclose it. And some of the influencers are like, I wouldn't do that unless, I wouldn't do that to my followers. Like,
yeah,
I gotta say if I'm being paid to do an ad. And it's like, all right, Mr. FEC.
I would do anything to my followers.
I just think that's pretty standard stuff. Why would you spend money on an influence operation if people were like, so just so you know, I'm being paid to influence you?
Young
Not a good
Chomsky
one.
sold our fucking subscribers credit card information to Ghana. I mean, it's just like you can do whatever you want to your subscribers. They subscribe because they trust you, right?
And you own the list.
Yeah, you own the list. You own the list. Have any of you ever gotten a text message from maybe a political campaign in a state that you've never voted it? You've maybe never even been there. It's because I sold it to them.
Thank you.
That's what we do here.
So Chairman Comer.
Yep.
I'm just saying that's his name.
That's his name.
He opened up an investigation into Chorus.
Comer on Chorus.
Trying to basically make an example of them, right? And this is the method that is kind of popping up and being mirrored across all these different investigations. So this kind of funding structure is labeled a network. And they exploit this kind of like 990 opacity to say that the umbrella is like a conduit for all of this funding. And so that enables them to ask for records and then subpoenas, and then through the power of the executive, investigate these networks to eventually defund and then debank them.
Yes.
And that's the kind of strategy. So this type of investigation, I bring this up because it's being repeated across, I guess, what you would call the like entire progressive funding ecosystem, which includes major organizations like the Ford Foundation and the Gates Foundation, right? There's like a Senate probe looking into connections. This is literally a quote, with Belt and Road linked universities.
What, like new universities?
Which is really crazy. This is all just to attack the tax exemptions.
Yeah.
Right. Then, of course, they're looking at open society. So DOJ has directed U.S. attorneys in 7 states that came out to prepare like RICO probes. There's also like arson and wire fraud and material support charges.
Arson?
I don't know. This is like after Trump had tweeted that he wanted Soros charged. And DOJ was apparently getting a bunch of U.S. attorneys to kind of like look into this. I don't think there's a way for them to do this, but there's like open investigations. The biggest one was the SPLC.
Yeah.
Now, they were actually indicted on wire fraud and money laundering. So that actually took. They were federally indicted on 11 counts. And it was, the feds are alleging that they used $4.1 million to pay informants inside extremist groups.
Yeah, that was, I read a bunch about that. It's a pretty crazy case. It's funny. SPLC also is the people that labeled the Center for Security Policy a hate group because of course, they hate Muslims. Yeah, they really are going the fuck after them. And they also, it's funny, part of me is like, I wonder if this was to like expose the informants. Like this is the entire purpose of this. Because there's this interesting thing on the right where a bunch of like people who were part of what you would call the alt-right in like 2015, 2016, 2017 have kind of like cleaned up their act and become just like normie conservatives. Like that is like what younger 25 to 30-year-old conservatives are now. It's like usually former members of like Richard Spencer's groups or whatever. And they have this weird thing where like, even though they themselves have basically identical beliefs to a lot of people in these groups, they'll be like, these groups are like Fed run or something like that. And this allowed, after this stuff came out, they were really like, look, this is run by the feds. Like all these guys are informants. But that is true. Like people do be fucking informing on each other. And that's a TrueAnon rule. Never tell a soul. Don't even tell your wife. what's going on. If you are the Grand Cyclops of the Ku
You
Klux
can
Klan,
tell your wife.
if you are the leader of the Clan of Ridgewood, if you take out your little brow piercing, the one right in the middle there on the bridge of the nose, at night, and you put on your hood, your linen hood, and you go out there and you light a, well, I'm trying to think of what they would light in Ridgewood. If you light a stick of Nag Champa out there, in front of a gentrifier's house, don't tell your wife, your partner, your boyfriend, any of the other people in your polycule what you're doing. It's just, ridiculous. There's somebody else we should mention here, because the feds are going after these groups, and I have heard that a lot of like the Rockefeller, Ford Foundation, whatever, all that kind of stuff, are like really pulling back on political spending now because of this, in sort of anticipation of shit coming down the pipeline. Somebody who has not pulled back on that stuff is a guy named Fergie Chambers. If you are at all familiar with the American left-wing scene, you've likely heard about him. He has been the subject of many scandalized New York Post articles. He is the famous left-wing heir to the Cox fortune. Pause on that. Arrested in Ibiza, Spain on July 10th. Ibiza on the 10th. The U.S., as of now, has not released the charges or even put out a statement on his arrest, which is kind of weird, but it is confirmed by the Spanish government and by his family that he was arrested to be extradited to the United States. Fergie Chambers, I think, has lived a troubled life. Famously did that whole Berkshire communist thing. And it's funny, when I first encountered Fergie Chambers on the internet a long time ago, I thought it was Berkshire. And I thought it was a town in England, because I'm like, this guy kind of looks English. And I was like, I didn't like watch him speak or anything like that, because he's kind of got this little cap on.
Yeah, he's always got a little cap on.
Always got a little cap on.
And suspenders, if I remember.
I don't know.
Or
Always
has
has suspenders, but he can be known to dress old-timey sometimes, it looks
Okay.
like. And I didn't realize it was Berkshire, as in like Berkshire Hathaway, as in like Western Massachusetts, very wealthy area. But he had a little...
But wealthy but beautiful.
I've never been. It looks quite beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous. He famously did the Berkshire communist thing. He had a like little compound out there, which of course TrueAnon rule would be never to move there. A bunch of people did. He has hundreds of millions of dollars. He did fund a bunch of stuff, gives a bunch of money to Palestine, but he also backed up Calla Walsh and the Palestine Action people, who got arrested for breaking into an Elbit Systems factory. And he, there's, I think, some maybe complications that are going to come for that. He's from Atlanta, because Cox Media is from Atlanta. He's from Atlanta, and he also funded a bunch of the Stop Cop City stuff. I don't really know exactly what he funded there. The thing is with that's also interesting, is it just came out, but I believe it happened last year, is that a guy who was under investigation from the cops, because the Atlanta PD did this. We did an episode on Stop Cop City a while ago, but the Atlanta Police Department was really investigating them, wanted to do all these RICO. They did RICO charges that fell apart. But one of the activists involved in that last year was flying back to Atlanta from overseas. And he was stopped at the airport by the police, or I believe by DHS. And they asked for his phone, and he used Graphene OS on his Android phone and wiped it. And he is being charged, I believe, with obstruction of justice or something like that.
Which is the first case of this, I think.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I had never seen one of these, or I didn't know about these as kind of apps.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's cool. So it's a code that you put in.
Yeah.
That you've like predetermined, and it wipes your phone when you enter that code.
Yeah. Which I think is useful. And I don't really see how that's illegal, because I also don't think you can legally search your phone, although oftentimes they do. It's also another thing, never have face recognition on your phone, because then cops don't need the password. But he is really, Fergie Chambers has been quite a notorious figure in the right-wing press. I will say, there is a large free press like piece on him, and it appears that they let Susie Weiss, Barry Weiss's little and even somehow less talented sister, come visit the Berkshire Communists compound or whatever and take pictures of him. Don't do that. Like
What?
if you're
Yeah,
if
come
you're
on.
like a left wing guy, don't do that. Like don't let these people in. Don't let them take pictures of you. Don't do that. Just don't do that. That attention will not be good. I don't understand. I remember that came out. I was like, why did this guy do this? Calla Walsh now, I think, lives in like Lebanon or something. And she is like also always in the New York Post, yada, yada, yada. She's been to Iran a couple times. And I think that what happened is Fergie Chambers left the country, moved to Tunisia, and he moved a bunch of money over there. And what they're trying to get him on is like money laundering and material support for Hamas. Or whatever. I mean, they haven't actually said, but that's the implication is that he's giving money to Hamas. Now, the reality is he is giving a lot of money to like the Samir Project and things like this to families in Gaza. There is no proof that he's given money to Hamas or anything like that. The government hasn't even. It's very hush hush how they're treating this, and it's funny because this so-called left-wing government of Spain, that so-called support of Palestine, etc. Is now sending its security forces out to arrest a guy in Ibiza, the party island. It's not good. But he also has been a long time. Also, my suggestion is this too. Fergie Chambers is in jail. I'm not trying to criticize Fergie Chambers right now. That's not what this is about. But if you are somebody who is this high profile, keep it offline, and keep like he did all this. He went to to Donbass and did all this stuff, but he also has been publicly beefing with like PSL and Roy Singham for a while. And so he's been sort of calling out Roy Singham on his Twitter account. And I got to tell you, Fergie, there's basically one other guy that's in the same position as you are right now. In fact, he's in a slightly better position. And that would be Roy Singham.
So Roy Singham is AKA Neville Roy Singham. Not surprised you dropped the Neville.
Yeah.
Kind of a tough one. But has become the kind of big boogeyman on the right. Right-wing media is really obsessed with him right now.
Yep.
He is a tech multimillionaire. He had a company, something called ThoughtWorks. I don't know what that is.
Me either.
Some early web 2.0 company. He sold it for $785 million.
Chump change.
And moved his ass to China.
Yeah, I understand that. It stretches the dollar out further.
And basically set up a large kind of ecosystem of left-wing nonprofits and different sort of kind of organizing centers and forums and all sorts of things. He's also married to Jody Evans, who is the co-founder of Code Pink, which is one of the more prominent I don't know what year Code Pink was founded, but one of the more prominent anti-war activist groups. They're always in pink, in my mind. From what I know, it's always like a bunch of old ladies in pink saying like no war with, insert country here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they do. Conservatives became really obsessed with him because they said that he bankrolled the No Kangs protests. They were like, these protests are spreading like wildfire because of the Singham network. And that network includes, yes, Code Pink, also a place called the People's Forum.
Yep.
Which is under investigation, which is a spot in New York City. I've never been there.
Manhattan.
It's in Manhattan.
Yeah, I've been there a few times. I think they are paying way too much for rent and they should move that to a cheaper. I'm serious.
There's something called the Tri-Continental Institute for Social Research, and then also Breakthrough News,
yes,
which recently received, there's a bunch of other ones, but they, along with some other news groups, just received subpoenas, I believe, after refusing to turn over documentation to the feds. I'm going to get to that in a second. So in 2023, pre-Trump, the New York Times ran a huge piece called "A Global Web of Chinese Propaganda Leads to a U.S. Tech Mogul."
The webbed wing of the dragon.
Yes. Hidden amid a tangle of nonprofit groups and shell companies is Mr. Singham, who works closely with the Chinese government media machine and is financing its propaganda worldwide. So the whole bent of the article is that there's this how is all this pro-China, anti-US how are all these talking points spreading? Oh, it's all coming from this network, from this like tech guy who lives in China and works on the behest of the Chinese government, even though it's also his own money and not Chinese money, but still maybe it is Chinese money. We're not sure. That's kind of the New York Times.
That's the implication of that piece.
Yeah. The result, this is a quote from them. The result is a seemingly organic bloom. You gotta love the New York Times flourish.
Yes.
Of far left groups that echo Chinese government talking points, echo one another, and are echoed in turn by Chinese state media.
So many echoes. It's like we're in a damn echo chamber here.
It is just such an elegant design by the dragon. No, it's dastardly design. The dastardly dragon design. So the piece goes through his network, how it kind of like routes all this money through all of these obscure nonprofits, how he shares an office in Shanghai with a Chinese media company. Hello. Red flag. The reddest flag.
Yes.
And they point out, they're like, oh, since 2017, that's when he married Jodie Evans, like Code Pink has gotten all this money from him. And it's like, well,
he married. Come on.
Yeah. And then they're like, and since then, they've stopped criticizing the Chinese Uyghur stuff.
I forgot about the Uyghurs. We love the Uyghurs.
Never forget about the Uyghurs. Also, they obviously don't call it the Uyghur stuff, but y'all know what I'm.
Yeah.
Y'all know what I'm talking
The New York Times
about.
has style. They don't talk about the Uyghur stuff anymore.
I will say though, they showed a screen grab of his like wedding website. This is like a big part of the article. It's so crazy. And I will say the wedding day like included a panel discussion called The Future of the Left.
Okay, come on, man.
Can you imagine?
Roy, we don't got to be doing all that. If I got whatever $750 million, no panels at the wedding.
No panels at the wedding. This is I want to pull this because this is going to come up. We're going long, but a little bit later in the episode. In 2017, Mr. Singham married Jodie Evans, a former Democratic political advisor and co-founder of Code Pink. The wedding in Jamaica was a who's who of progressivism. Photos from the event show Amy Goodman.
Amy Goodman, welcome to Jamaica.
Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, and V, the playwright formerly known as Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina Monologues.
She's at my wedding. She's ghostwriting the vow.
No, but there's a reason that I'm bringing this up because I was reading this and I was like, wait a second, I recognize all of those names because they actually show up, those exact names, in the State Department report on Cuba and the Global Communist Network. So I want to circle back to that a little bit later in this episode because I remember when I was reading that State Department report, I was like, why the fuck are you talking about the lady who wrote the Vagina Monologues? Like, what are you even talking about? And then I see it in print in the dang New York Times, and I'm going, wait a second.
Was it like didn't the Vagina Monologues? I can't remember who we talked about. There was a guy we talked about. It might have been Stephen Miller that pissed him off. He was like, "How come there's no penis diatribes or whatever?" Like it fucked him up.
Oh
in
yeah,
college,
there
seeing the
was
Vagina
it one?
Monologues.
Was it Stephen Miller?
I can't remember. It was a guy like that.
It was somebody.
Yeah.
Which, okay. So the other thing that this piece notes that's important, and I kind of brought this up. He says none of Mr. Singham's nonprofits have registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's FARA, which is required of groups that seek to influence public opinion on behalf of foreign powers. That's usually applies to groups taking money or orders from foreign governments. Legal experts say Mr. Singham's network is an unusual case. That's because they can't say that he's taking Chinese money. Right?
The New York Times would recommend that you actually just hire stringers from a country that you're reporting on to report things at the behest of the government there.
So now remember, this was written back in 2023. Now it was just reported just a month ago on June 29th that there's a federal grand jury probe in our old backyard in the SDNY into Roy Singham and his so-called network. Now, U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton is running it. And all of the subpoenas have been personally authorized by friend of the show, Todd Blanche.
Mm-hmm.
And they are mainly targeting the People's Forum because that's the New York City event space, which they call a tax-exempt fiscal sponsor. But they're also going after all of those broader network orgs like Code Pink. And I mentioned the Breakthrough News subpoenas and all of that. Now, all of this grew out of a FAR inquiry. I'm trying to kind of like show how all of this is sort of knitting together into this sort of new legal regime and attack on all left-wing speech and activism, right? So the FAR stuff is like really probably not going to go very far because, again, it's all Roy's money. It's not Chinese money. He's using his own money. But what it's doing is it's help reframing the entire scope, right? Because it's not he's not a domestic political donor doing First Amendment stuff, right?
Yeah.
But he is a foreign agent, a communist Chinese spy, which is a big thing on the right now. And so this kind of like is becoming the administration's like proof of concept for this like single idea, just to kind of like bring this all back around, which is that the American left is not a domestic political movement, but a foreign directed operation. Right. And this is how all of these pieces are sort of fitting together. And this is exactly how the State Department is putting it in that new 100-page report that came out just after this ministerial called Cuba, the Capital of 21st Century Communism.
So that is 99 pages long. I read it while lounging in the park the other day and was bit to hell by mosquitoes. So it's a kind of funny document that also seems sort of informed by certain segments of the online rights talking points that have been brought up over the years, because there's some stuff that shoehorned into it that I'm like, I don't know if this is really necessarily necessary for this. But it purports to show the unparalleled influence of the Cuban government upon the landscape of the American left over the previous 70-something years. So it correctly does note that the new left, it spends a lot of time on the new left in this. The new left didn't like the Soviet Union.
Can we?
It's like, it's 2026, dude.
I can't even handle reading about it in the New Left Review.
They
stopped talking about it finally.
It's just now,
let these debates.
We can't have these kind of conversations be happening in a world where there's so many new seasons of Fortnite. Like, it's just like, it's 2026. They're like, okay, well, the new left didn't like the Soviet Union. Instead, actually, they liked Cuba, although it completely elides the actual heavy influence of China on the new left. It's just like puts all that onto Cuba. And Cuba was very influential in the 1960s worldwide new left movement. But there's so much overemphasis on it that they actually blame the Weather Underground's sort of failed riot in Chicago, the Days of Rage, on the Cubans and North Vietnamese. Like, it's just so ridiculous.
It's funny because I do think, this reminded me, and also because you brought up how it's very like new right Twitter coded.
Yeah.
It's like a boomer was like got really online.
Yes.
So it has all this like old boomer like bugbears. Like, just hearing about the North Vietnamese, you're like, really?
Yeah.
But then also inflected with all of this stuff about the kind of like extremely online left and extremely online right.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, it's funny. It inveighs against, and this is, so I think this document serves two purposes. One is, no matter how many reforms Cuba tries to do or how much nice they're trying to make, we are fucking with Cuba. Like, we do not, the U.S. is going after Cuba. And this serves that purpose, but it also shows from the U.S. government side that they do think that they're engaged in a civilizational war. So like, their foreign entanglement, the war that they're talking about starting in Cuba or whatever they're trying to do there, is another front on the same war that they're fighting against these Cuban influence U.S. groups. So the document inveighs against the National Lawyers Guild, every famous Black Power activist except MLK, Pastors for Peace. I mean, we're talking about like SNCC and Malcolm X, like everybody in there. Pastors for Peace, the National Network on Cuba, which includes the DSA, National Lawyers Guild, Code Pink, and of course, Code Pink itself. It picks out the People's Forum and Manolo and Roy, which is a guy involved in that, and Roy Singham and the so-called Singham Network, PSL, I think they mentioned PSL. The reality is I mean, I think
They
everybody.
mentioned Hassan
Yes, they mentioned
by
Hassan.
name, Amy Goodman by name.
Yes,
They mentioned Eve Ensler by name, and Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, they have actually. They mentioned the Roy Singham, Jody Evans wedding, and in fact, they quote from the New York Times.
It's
and they're
crazy.
like, the vagina monologues person was there. It's just like, okay. So it portrays, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the Tricontinental Conference in 1966 that took place in Cuba. And in fact, for weirdly enough, a list of every group that attended, I can't help but think that maybe that this was AI assisted in the creation of this, because that's like, why is this here? Like, there's no other similar list in the rest of the document. I mean, that was 1966. That was like fucking 80 years ago. And every single person that was there was dead. Not every single person, but most of them are now. It portrays a movement that was once like Cuba sponsored all of these like worldwide terror groups, which it didn't. It did assist revolutionaries in South and Central America. But like when I went to Africa, for instance, those were like soldiers going there. That was a military intervention by Cuba. It says like, okay, that era ended, and now they're just doing this sort of march through the institutions, these American liberal institutions, and kind of taking over America via its tendrils in the academy and in minority groups. They mentioned that Karen Bass went to Cuba a bunch of times. She was in the Venceremos, which they also mentioned was run by Cuban intelligence. Some other mayor of LA went to Cuba as well in the 1960s. They have this fucking. Can you read this line? I mean, this is they try to sort of update it for the modern day.
Today, the travel and exchange model, pioneered by the early Venceremos brigades, has become something of a cottage industry. On top of the still running Venceremos brigades, other recurring U.S. delegations to Cuba now include the International May Day Brigade, Witness for Peace Solidarity Collective Delegations, and, quote, Friendshipment Caravans, which have been run since 1992 by IFCO/Pastors for Peace to, quote, demonstrate to the Cuba people that they have allies even in the belly of the beast in the U.S., parentheses, a common turn of phrase among members of the Cuba network. Celebrity leftist streamer Hassan Piker worked with a Ketchum, Idaho-based media organization called Belly of the Beast LLC to produce a pro-Cuba documentary during his recent trip to the island.
Oops. It's shoehorning Hassan in there is so funny. It's like the whole. I think that this was literally, this document came about because of that trip that we went on to Cuba.
Maybe. I mean, all this stuff has been in the works for a long time.
No, I know, but like that was such a big like talking point on the right for like 2 weeks. It was like, it had some legs on it that I'm like, I think that like that, I mean, like, why mention Hassan in this,
They should have mentioned how expensive his damn sunglasses are.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's become a big target for the right. And I think that, it's not, I think something about this administration is that again, much like AI, there's a big mix of like old and new. And so you have this sort of like these old school institutional, especially boomer kind of like, we're gonna fucking go after Cuba.
Yeah.
Which is just the Rubio, like, I'm locked in, we're doing this, and all my old State Department guys are behind me. But we also got to appeal from my super online homies, so let's drop a Hassan reference in. We're not going to bore them with too much of this, like, stuff about the North Vietnamese, but I got to, throw that in for my Gulf buddies too.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I mean, of course, we went on journalist visas as journalists. I think Hassan was actually on a journalist visa too. But it is just like completely, I mean, they really, the document is totally bizarre. And they also kind of blame BLM on Cuba too, which is just completely crazy.
You got to throw everything in there.
And they keep being like, they actually supported the Nicaragua against the Contras. It's like, well, we supported the Contras. So I'm like, well, you can't really, are you mad at them for doing that? I don't understand. Like, they harbor international terrorists. I'm like, well, you harbored a guy that blew up an airliner full of Cuban civilians. Like, it's completely ridiculous. It is, I think, though, very notable that they are trying to tie domestic left-wing groups to these foreign countries.
Well, that's like, I keep thinking of it as this sort of like pincer movement, right? Because it isn't as if the State Department is just like operating alongside this domestic campaign. I think it's a little bit different, right? It's like the State Department is actually like supplying the legal justifications for the domestic rollout.
Yes.
Like, this is how this is all kind of fitting together. So on the one side, you have all the foreign stuff where the State Department comes in and designates these FTOs and helps figure out all these other kind of, global terror designations. And you get the major visa restrictions, which is another part of this, and the official findings that then are able to sort of characterize organizations and movements as foreign directed or foreign backed. And all of that is like, that's all of the action that then supplies the legal findings that allow the executive, the government, to treat the conduct as connected to foreign threats, to open up all of those state powers that would then otherwise be unavailable.
Yeah.
Right? So this comes from the visa restriction policy targeting far left terrorists and other aligned groups. And this is what, it's a new policy that lets the State Department under the INA deny entry to any foreign national that it believes would have and this is what it calls it, serious foreign policy consequences. It's extremely broad, extremely vague by design. Nobody knows what that means. But they say that it covers people who, quote, supported or incited acts of terrorism, participated in economic sabotage, don't know what that means, financed, recruited, or provided logistical support for violent or criminal actions, and facilitated convergence of far-left terrorists and other aligned networks for purposes of violent action. So this is them barring people at the border, which is dovetailing with the FTO designations. And they've since, and this is interesting, they've announced up to $10 million in what they're calling rewards for justice bounties.
I didn't know about that.
So this is serious. This is bounties for information disrupting the financial mechanisms supporting designated far-left terrorism groups.
I mean, this is crazy because this is just like, we are not in an era of far-left terrorism worldwide. We just aren't. It's just, even if no matter what your political beliefs are, it's just a fact. We're not even really in an era of far-right-wing terrorism worldwide. There's really not that much terrorism going on worldwide right now.
Yeah.
And the explicit angling against far left terrorism here, I think anybody can read between the lines and see what's actually happening. And it's to keep people out of the country that the government does not like. And this sort of dovetails with like trying to kick out Mahmoud Khalil for national security threats or something like that. I mean, it's all kind of has a bit of a precedent in the immediate, the fight against the encampment movement on these college campuses. But then also it reminds one of like the Palmer raids in the first Red Scare, and kicking out all those foreign people who were like, Italian anarchists for the most part, or Czechs or whatever. It does recall to me also on a personal level, that DHS document that Ken Klippenstein got his hands on a while ago, from CBP, I think New York, National Targeting Center, that linked me as a possible foreign events involving individuals as suspected or confirmed Antifa links in the Syrian conflict. Because I remember the reason they were trying to do that was obviously to set up some sort of foreign link, because then you can get some kind of terror charges there. And that, I don't like that, which is just so funny because like I've never been like an Antifa guy. I'm, in fact, maybe people call me Profa. But it is, it's a little bit worrying there, because I FOIA'd myself a while ago too, and they withheld the whole thing, but it was many pages long. And the reasons for withholding, which they do supply for each page, did worry me a little bit, although I'm not tripping too much about it. But I mean, I'm clean as they come, clean as a whistle. But I think that it's very obvious what they're trying to do here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like they're trying to set up these pretexts to basically bust anybody that they see as a enemy of the state. And it's, not to be dramatic about it, but it is clear that they're targeting sort of these like communist, anarchist, whatever groups first because they are the least sympathetic. It's also funny, I forgot about this. They were blaming the movement against data centers in the US on PSL too. And I'm like, PSL wishes that it had that kind of reach. No disrespect, but come on. That seems fairly organic to me. But they're like, it's Chinese influence on PSL that is influencing people in like fucking Spanish Fork or whatever to not want a data center there. It's all pretty ridiculous. But this is real. I think this is, a lot of times, you talk about a lot. We've talked about a lot of like stuff similar to this has happened in the past, but this is happening this second. This is happening right now. And I think it would behoove people to start acting like this is happening. And so, first of all, people got to get out of their heads that anything you write on, or you got to get it in your heads, that anything you write on a computer or a phone, that can appear in court. Doesn't matter if you delete it, doesn't matter, whatever, that can appear in court. You're not going to outsmart them. If you want to have a conversation with somebody that you think could get you in trouble, even if it's completely innocent, have it in person with no recording devices around. Put them in the freezer in another room. Put them in a Faraday bag. It's just, but don't text about it. And it's just, it's the government they're taking a whole of government approach to this stuff, and they are inventing things. I think that should really worry people. They are if the Prairieland case has taught us anything, they are inventing narratives out of whole cloth in order to lock people up for not only a lifetime, but for a lifetime and a half of time. And it's not good. It's a serious situation. Well, another cheery, uplifting episode from the TrueAnon podcast.
Well, there'll be more where that came from.
Yeah,
either cheery or not cheery.
We gotta do why not talk about some good news? We gotta do.
We
a good
did
news
last episode. We do
what
what we want.
That we do, and we do what we fucking want. We do
what we want.
I do what I want.
We're the number one good news show in America. Number one conservative show in America. And with that being said, my name is Brace.
I'm Liz.
I'm producer Young Chomsky.
And this has been TrueAnon. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Jeffrey Epstein.